Sure. So my name's Rachel, and the original photograph was taken, must be about 11 and a half years ago now, and it was just after our first child, our son, had been born. And I think it's probably the first outing that we made, with him being the first. It was a bit difficult, it took us a while to get used to all the things we had to do, and we didn't get out very much for the first few days. So I think he was probably about a week old, and we decided to venture out with the pram. And I remember feeling very self-conscious pushing this pram, that somehow didn't feel right. And we just went to the local park and had a little wander around, and then probably came back home again. Felt that was it for the day, really. In the picture, the two of us are together. We've got our shiny new pram with us. I think John's holding the pram, pushing the pram, and I'm standing next to him, and we're just inside the entrance to the park, I think. The fact that it was the first outing, I think, the whole family went. My mum was taking pictures of us and felt that was kind of important. Maybe there was a bit of me that sort of felt, I'm not ready for photos, but it's really important, I think, capturing those moments, and it's nice to look back on now, really. We're both trained as historians, and he was always, I think for him, it was always very important to get to know a place, to get to know the history of a place, and he was very good at doing that, and that was very much how he put down roots. And I think because this was the place that we moved to together, this was the first house that we'd kind of bought together, that was really important. It was a really important part of making a home here and bringing up our family here. So it was tied into all of that as well. He was a wonderful person. He was a historian, and he was absolutely passionate about history, very interested in it, worked on the 17th century, and that's really why we got to know each other. But he had all kinds of other talents as well. So he was a bit of a photographer. So one of the issues I don't have very many pictures of him, because he was always the one behind the camera. Sometimes when we were out with the children, sometimes I used to get a little bit irritated that, I'd be doing stuff with the children and he'd be off somewhere taking pictures. And that's one of those things that I look back now and I think I'm so glad he did that. Because while I don't have lots of pictures of him, what I do have is lots of pictures of his view of the world, if you like. And in some ways, that's actually quite important now. And it's almost as comforting to be able to look at the pictures that he took as it might be to actually look at pictures of him. One of the other things he was very good at was cooking, so he tended to do the cooking. It wasn't me who did the cooking. And so again, in terms of remembering him, I often remember him in the kitchen, and we often, as a family, we remember him through meals that we have and things like that. So yeah, he was great. As I say, he was a historian, so some people knew, he wrote a couple of books, so some people knew that side of him, but maybe didn't know that he took photographs, because that was much more of a personal, it was a hobby, he didn't do anything with it particularly. But I suppose even more with the people, and people talked about this, that because we moved up here for my job, John gave up his job in London, and he'd got a contract to write his book. So he said, well, it's all right, I won't look for work immediately, I'll just get the book written. I've had this contract, I've not been able to do it because I've been working and commuting, so now's my opportunity to do it. So he worked on the book, he finished the book, and by the time he finished the book, I was pregnant with Thomas, and it was kind of, well, okay, I'll stay at home and look after the baby, that's fine. So he was the one who would take the children to school, would collect them from school. And so there were people who saw him in the playground and would just know him as, the children's dad, and didn't know anything else of what he did. He liked being able to spend the time with them, he was very good with them. When I look back on it now, I think at the time I worried a bit that, from not particularly financially, but for him, was it better for him to get back and get a job? Was that going to be a problem? But when I look back on it now, I'm so glad that they had that really concentrated time with him. And I know that in some ways Anna in particular feels that she doesn't remember all that much. But I think there are things that are there. And I think if it had been a much more traditional arrangement and he'd left early in the morning and come home late at night, I think they would have had much less experience of being with him than they did. So I look back and I think I'm actually really glad that we did that. It was a good thing, I think, for both of them. Yeah, and and for him as well, for him to have had that time with his children actually feels to me really important. Talking about that connection with him, I suppose I'm taking my lead from the fact that that was very much how he was. So when he became ill, it was important to him that we were open and honest with the children, that we didn't hide things away from them. Obviously, they were young, you have to adapt what you're saying to suit them. But the idea was that when we got more information, we kind of gave them that information. And as I say, it very much came from him, so it feels like it's continuing what he would have wanted. And also, I suppose I found that it worked, that I found that did seem to make it easier. Sounds odd, because in some ways, I still think it's kind of, you think about children and you think it's one of the worst possible things that can happen. But I think they appreciated the honesty. They appreciated the fact that things weren't being hidden from them. And so I've wanted to carry that on and to give them the space. It's very important to me to talk about him, to remember him, be allowed to do that. And it feels as though it's important for them as well, and trying to give them, in a way that suits them, but the opportunity to be able to do that and to talk about how they feel. Yeah, I mean, I suppose in some ways I wish, in society, I wish we talked more, and that's something that I've kind of learnt. So I've had experiences, lots of people will avoid mentioning him because obviously they think that it's going to make you upset. There was one or two people who've come and said to me, "Oh, I was thinking about John the other day and I was just thinking he would have really liked this." And that makes me really happy, because it makes me think somebody else hasn't forgotten him. They're still thinking about him in the way that I do. And in that sense, he's not forgotten. And that's really, really important. But I'm not sure I'd have realised that beforehand. I think I'd probably have seen it as, I don't want to upset them. If I mention the name, that might be sad for them. They might not want that in public. So it's really realising, well, it kind of doesn't work like that, So in some ways, I feel I wish we did talk more, because I think that would be healthier in lots of ways. It's a small thing, but I'm much more inclined, if somebody's had something difficult, I know that something unpleasant has happened to them, I'm much more likely to go and say something, do something, because I know that those people who did that really early on when we were having a difficult time, it meant a lot. And so I'm much bolder about doing that. I'll just, go ahead and do it, rather than thinking, I don't know. And I kind of think that feels like a good thing. It feels like that's a better way of being. But then that's hard, because I sort of think, I wish he was still here, ultimately. The idea that something, this idea that, every cloud has a silver lining, that just doesn't feel appropriate in terms of the situation. Give me the choice. I'd rather my children had their dad still. I'd rather I still have my husband here. Whatever good things, But yeah, it does change you. It does change how you see things, how you see other people. I probably also care less about the little things now. They don't matter so much. There are some things that are really important in life, and there are other things that you just have to say, well, never mind, His birthday, in some ways, I find relatively easy. The ones that I find hard, the anniversary of when he died, because that always brings back all of those memories from that time. But I also find very hard our wedding anniversary, because that feels like one that I don't share with anybody else. There's only me. So that one's always particularly hard for me. But I suppose in a sense I feel that those, hard as they might be, it's quite important to mark those occasions and to remember. And the wedding anniversary, I might look at some of the photos of the wedding, I might go to the bench, and although it is a difficult day, it feels as though that's important. Again, I don't know, I suppose I keep coming back to this idea that those memories are really important. To be able to keep having them, to be able to keep revisiting them actually matters a lot. And I guess that's the importance of the photos, that they help you to be able to do that. So they help facilitate that process, if you like. I think about him every day. That's just how it is. So it's not kind of like it only suddenly crops up on these occasions. But yeah, there is something about, life's busy. 2 children, job, things are busy. But there's something about taking a moment to pause and just reflect in that way that I think is important. With the children, I suppose I feel, it's more than 3 years now, I feel as though we've found a way of being that works for us. We work as a team now. Obviously, initially, you kind of feel as though one wheel's missing or something. Whereas I feel, not that we've forgotten or don't miss him or don't wish he was here or anything like that, but we've found our way of working together. And so the kids inevitably move you into the future. You kind of can't do anything else. Yeah, I guess I don't like to think about the point when they come to leave home. And that's far enough off at the moment. I guess as I get nearer to that, we'll find ways of managing that too.